there are three things that we know from research are distinguishing what happens in our bodies when we are teenagers. The first is self-centeredness. The second is peer pressure. And the third is being more risk-prone than when you're out of adolescence. You risk more. Self-centered, peer pressure, you risk more. If you look at the decisions of Brexit or Trump, you could say these are adolescential decisions. They're decisions typical for teenagers, not for adults. Also because they address the core part of our brain, the amygdala and hippocampus, which have been developed over the last 200,000 years to make sure that we can respond through evolution to the challenges we're immediately facing in the short term. While what distinguishes us from the Australopithecus is the prefrontal cortex that allows us to look ahead, to plan. So these are short-term decisions, and I do believe that the explanation for the victory of Trump is also within what has happened in the last 20 years in terms of trust and credibility of elites. Business has lost its credibility. CEOs have lost their credibility. If you look at the company sources, the lowest credibility is attributed to the website. Then comes advertising. Then comes public relation. They're all very low in their credibility. No surprise to me. What is a surprise, though, in the last 20 years is that the credibility of CEOs is the same as the credibility of a PR officer. Very low. Who is the most credible source in a company? The average employee. If you look at political context, just to come back to the elephant in the room, the most credible source is the average citizen. And the campaign of Trump was addressed not at the prefrontal cortex, it was addressed at the amygdala. It was addressed at the core of what you want to say, what you feel, and that's what he addressed with his tweets in a very old-fashioned way to deal with communications. It has been started by Edward Bernays, the double nephew of Sigmund Freud. It has been pursued by Joseph Goebbels and Leni Riefenstahl, and lots of other people. Stalin has made good use of it as well. It's the manipulative part. I would like to look at the non-manipulative part. Not because it's good or bad, it's right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. Everything we do simply has consequences, and we have to take responsibility for consequences. So let's look at the situation at large. Again, to sum up my view on the election of Trump is there has been a structural lack of listening by the elites in America, and not only in America. Look at Europe, look at Brexit, look at Hungary, look at Poland, look at movements in France, in Italy, in Germany. You can find them everywhere. I would not comment on Ukraine. I don't know this country well enough to be able to make any kind of judgment. But what has happened is the gatekeeper role of the media has enormously changed over the last years, and I'll come to that in a minute. And both media and the establishment have stopped to learn and to listen to the people out there. And was interesting about, the panel just addressed the importance of how good the information has been conveyed. Information is sending. Communication is listening. And that is the big lack. And Trump and their campaigners listened. They listened to the gut feelings of the Americans. And if you look at the factual development, you can see that globalization has harmed one part of the world, and that's middle classes. Middle classes in developed countries. All the rest of the developments in the world have improved over the last 30 years. You have gained democracy in Central and Eastern Europe. The tiger states have become developed states. Hunger has diminished and starvation. All the figures are good. The only figure that is really decreasing is the middle class ability to grow, to be mobile. But let's stop at the elephant in the room here, and let's come back to two basic trends that can relate to politics and so forth, and that I wrap up in communicative leadership. The first I addressed already, and that is lack of credibility and trust of the elites. and the growth of the average citizen and the average employee as the most credible source all over the world, by the way. Just as a bracket, of course, I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and it's here, but I do believe that most PowerPoint presentations have very little power and almost no point anyway. So I will somehow click through it. I will obey to Christina's orders. And you know, I work in a German environment. I have a German wife, so I'm used to obey to the Führer, even though I'm Italian. Okay, so the first thing being the lack of credibility. The second thing is a very important phenomenon, is that through social media, the internet, and technological empowerment, that average person, that average employee, has gained the power of the voice of the media. We have lost the power of the gatekeepers. If you think, I think I have it here as a, where is it here? 2007, the person of the year was you. The average person, well, you're not average. You're the crème de la crème, the elite of the Ukrainian business community. But you there, the average people, empowered by computers, smartphones, and the internet. These people can kill corporations or politicians. Just to share one little story, who knows Lane Hudson? I would be very surprised if you knew Lane Hudson. Lane Hudson in 2006, he's part of the cover story in Time magazine, was a 23-year-old student of Georgetown University. One evening he decided to go and have a drink in a bar, and the bartender mixes the drink and says, "Oh, this drink, by the way, is on that gentleman over there who's paying for that drink. He's inviting you to that." So Lane turns and sees a guy like me, fat, old, gray, with a cheesy smile. And finally, this guy sits close to Lane. And Lane feels uncomfortable. And this guy says, "Oh, have you ever tried to have sex with another man? I'm so good. Are you lonely?" Blah, blah, blah. Okay, typical nice harassment. Lane didn't want to follow up, decided to pay for his own drink, and wanted to go home. This guy gave him a business card and said, "If you feel lonely, call me up." So Lane went back home and did what a student does. He wrote his diary. I wrote my diary when I was a student. It was before World War I. And when I saw my two daughters, who are now grown-ups, in a corner giggling, I went to see what they were giggling about, and they had my diary. So it was terribly embarrassing, so I took it away, burnt it, and since then, I'm a more serious father to them. However, today's diaries you cannot burn. Lane Hudson made a blog, and he wrote in his blog, "Oh, I was harassed by a guy. He just wanted to invite me to his place. He was really, really nasty. He was really molesting me. He had a foul breath. He was terrible." And then he said, you know, he could improve my career as a normal student. He could do things for me because he's important. He gave me his business card. His name is Tom Foley, member of the House of Congress. So this blog sparked off some reactions from people. And they said, "Oh, I work at the Senate. When Tom Foley comes, we know him very well. He's known Tom, don't go to the loo Foley. Because whenever you go to the loo, this guy's there harassing people." So this thing mounts, and within 8 days, Tom Foley, father of 5 kids, member of the Baptist community in Florida, Republican, anti-gay right proposals, anti-abortion, was in tears in front of his cameras, admitting that his hobby was to molest young men, and he was quitting his job. In 8 days, Mr. Nobody, Lane Hudson, toppled a politician, while in that same city, 30 years earlier, 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists had to work 2 years with the Washington Post backing them to impeach Mr. Nixon. So this is what has changed in this world. What does this mean for leadership? What does this mean for companies? What does this mean for communication professionals, HR professionals, the C-suite? It means that if you feel that you can manage a reputation of a company through gatekeepers like communication professionals, so forth, you are dead. Because journalists don't matter any longer. I can tell you, I'm a trained journalist. In Italy, you have to have a state exam to be a journalist. I was trained in Italy, and I truly believe that journalism is one of the best parts of my career. I loved it, but I do admit that there is absolutely no point in asking journalism to survive just because of the intellectual idea that journalism can help society to advance. Facts are that every single individual can turn a fact into a news. So if you take this into account, it means that your company might be perceived by your stakeholders in a certain way, and if you believe that corporate communication can do the trick, forget about it. There is a wonderful book that you can't buy, but it's going to be out in September, and I recommend you strongly to go and buy it and go to Amazon whenever it's out. It's written by two friends of mine from Oxford. David Waller is the one that I know better, and it's called The Reputation Game. And it will address, I read it, it's a wonderful book. It's like a thriller, 800 pages, but full of stories on Blair, on Clinton, on Bush, on good and bad communication. And they say reputation is made of three things. The first pillar is behavior, who you are, what you do. The second pillar is relationships. What are your peers? What are your relationships with your stakeholders? And the third is communication. So let's start with the first issue, and that is how you behave. So if you believe that the reputation of a company cannot be molded by single communication officers, then you have to accept that the average employee of the company truly is an ambassador, okay? How many times has it happened to us in a call center, calling up somebody, whatever, a mobile phone company, asking for something because you didn't get it? And what happens if you know, there are situations where you get answers like, I can't answer this one. I have to ask my boss, okay? I will get back to you, if they get back to you, okay? Or, it's not my competence. This doesn't make you happy as a customer. On the other hand, if you have an employee who is truly driving the customer experience to enthusiasm, you will associate this company with something special. And the real behavior of people is what really matters. Now, how to change a company, how to change an organization, this goes for non-for-profits or for state organizations as well, to address these two issues of lack of credibility and the empowerment of the individual. Working at Allianz, which is an insurance company, globally working and based in Munich, but this is practiced by other companies, we have discovered that there are a couple of things you might want to do. And if you do them well, you can reach that goal. The first one is you have to be credible. So that's the core discipline. And the core discipline is called information. And information has to be true, has to be relevant, has to be interesting. So storytelling is important, but more than storytelling, it's not about tale-telling, it's about storytelling. It's about the dramatics of a story. It's not about the truth of the story. The truth has to be there, otherwise you can't proceed. So the first thing you have to be aware of to establish credibility is to have a proper information. Then comes one of the big misunderstandings of mankind. I always say, the biggest lie on earth, before the words, "Of course I love you, darling," is when a manager says, "I communicate." Because he, and normally it's a he, means I tell. Okay? So I decide something, and then I go to that beautiful young lady or handsome young boy who does the PR and says, "Communicate." It doesn't mean communicate, it means inform. We have to change that, and good corporations already change it. The core of communication is listening. The core of leadership is listening. What is leadership today? Leadership is the very difficult exercise of balancing the stakeholders' needs, of creating as much enthusiasm as possible in all the stakeholders without privileging just one. I give an example. Just imagine an insurance company that wants to enthuse their customers. So they offer an insurance policy which costs $1 a year and covers everything, including fraud. Great product. You would buy it. Unfortunately, the company would be broke. Or imagine that company deciding they want to be a good corporate citizen. They're going to pay out 100% of their profits to the taxman. Great corporate responsibility. Dead company. Well, the company that wants to please their employees. $1 million salary, 1 hour work a week. Great. And so forth. So the manager and the leaders have to balance these four stakeholders, and in order to do so, they have to be able to listen. They have to be able to listen to the stakeholders and make a reason and balance it out. And that is really necessary beyond the big data exercise. Listening is made of many dimensions. I was, after retiring from Allianz and engaging into my new life, I spent a couple of months in Australia. And we had a wonderful guide in northern Australia, in the Northern Territories, in the rainforest, Cape Tribulation. It was an Aborigine. And he said, "What do you do in life?" And I said, well, I tried to tell him what I do. I didn't do anything. Actually, I was in Australia having fun with my wife and my kid. So I said, well, I'm just writing a book. Oh, a book? What about? Oh, it's going to be called The Listening Leader. It's about the importance of listening. He said, oh, do you want to listen the Aborigine way? I said, yeah, of course. How is it? He said, look, when you listen, you look into the eyes. We don't like that. Sit close to me. And he sat close to me and put his hand on the table, and I had my hand on the table, and he put the hand close to me, just touching very briefly. It was nothing hard, or it was just a brief touch. He said, close your eyes. I closed my eyes. And then we had quiet. It was, try it out. Every word you sense then will be totally different. Or the visual dimension of listening. NLP, you know, but there are many things that we express through our body language and mimicry. All these things are parts that you cannot gather through big data. Just as a little bracket, let's go back for 3,500 years when economy started. Well, it's 5,000 years, 3,500 before Christ. With the Sumers in Mesopotamia, that's when we started to use tools for economic reasons. Now, the industrial age has substituted most of what we do with our hands and basic tools through machines. We are right now in an era where we are substituting the analytical abilities of our brain through machines. What is left, and what is at the core of the competences we should deal with, is the social and emotional intelligence that cannot be done by machines, at least not for now. So the relationships with the stakeholders, between the stakeholders. So brackets closed. You engage in a relationship with the stakeholders, and the third thing you need to do is enabling. And here I'm telling you a little story. A very cold winter morning in damned Munich, when I was in the hamster wheel of corporate life, I started, 7:30, go to the job, and I went through the corridors leading to my office. There were people working for me, and there was a phone ringing. Phone ringing in a room far away. So I heard the phone ringing, and it kept on ringing. So I got closer. I went into the room, answered the phone. It was the room of the managing editor of an employee magazine. And there was a lady saying, my husband is a pensioner of Allianz, and he receives the employee magazine, Allianz Journal. My husband is very sick, he's about to pass, and I wanted to cancel the subscription. I was slightly taken aback as an Italian. I thought, these Germans are really wonderful. This guy's dying, and she's canceling the subscription of the Allianz Journal. But, they're ticking their boxes. They're very orderly people, the Germans. So I said, okay, of course, I'm going to take down your name. I'm so sorry for your husband. I hope you spend some good days or weeks with him. Don't worry about the subscription. I'm going to cancel it right now. By the way, there's one thing that is more important. One day the inevitable thing happens. Your husband will pass. You're entitled to a widow pension by Allianz. So that's the name, Dr. Erich Götz. This is the extension. Call him up. It will speed up the process. Say hello from Emilio. It will help. I put down the phone, and I turn, and I see a guy sitting in the room. I hadn't seen him because I was answering the phone. I said, Niels, what the hell are you doing here? Why didn't you answer the phone? Well, it wasn't my phone. Yeah, who cares? It wasn't my phone either. We preach customer focus. Damn it, take up the phone. It was nothing special. We take down the name. Yes, but I'm not allowed. I'm just working for a subsidiary company. I'm not working for the holding company of Allianz. No, I wouldn't know what to say. I don't work for this department. I said, you are a lousiest employee I've ever seen in the last weeks because you don't care for customer focus. And this story I told many times in our corporate university meetings, management meetings, leadership meetings, just to highlight the lack of customer focus. One day, age is wonderful. You're all young. Believe me, age can be wonderful. You grow, and suddenly something dawned on me. It was a summer day. I was starting my book, and I just thought of Niels, and I had tears in my eyes. I'm sorry, it sounds very pathetic, but I did apologize to Niels later on. That was one of my many mistakes I did in my life, because what did Niels tell me if I had listened to him? He told me I'm not allowed to answer the phone. I wouldn't know what to say. I don't work for the holding company. This didn't say much about Niels, which I thought. It said a lot about our culture, how hierarchical we were, how little did we empower our people, so that they were scared to simply answer the phone. So instead of putting the blame on him, I should put the blame on me. And this is the third stage, information communication enabling. Enable our people to do their job. And remember one thing that you surely are all aware of. If you are, let me take another example, I like storytelling. You have your mid-year performance review with one of your staff members, Albert, okay? So Albert is coming for the mid-year review. You have that day, you have 6 mid-year reviews to do. You have your templates, you have to tick the boxes, and here you have Albert. Now Albert is an okay guy, is a bright guy, but in the recent months he'd had strange developments. He let his hair grow long. He has a mustache that is growing into his mouth, full of crumbles. He's telling bad jokes on blacks, on women, on Jews, on homosexuals. It's very uneasy, the whole thing. And on top of it, last week, he posted a picture of himself on Facebook with his tongue poking up to his skin. It was terrible. So you tell him, this doesn't work. We have a culture here. Now, if we agree, Albert and me, that you're going to have a good compliance, computer-based compliance training, okay? Then you're going to have a little course in our corporate university on political correctness and corporate culture. And then I'm going to give you, because I'm a good boss, a stylist that will address your look. Keep that mustache and the long hair if you want, but just make it a little bit more tidy, okay? Do you agree? If you agree, and you manage to achieve that by the end of the year, we can talk about the bonus. Now, Albert stands up, and you don't even know if he's in a room or not. You're just filling in the template, because you have the next one. You have to fill in the template. You're in a hamster wheel. So title, doctor. Name, Albert. Surname, Einstein. And here you have the guy who invented relativity theory who's saying, I quit. Einstein, that's a true story. Einstein told very, very politically incorrect stories. He was an untidy person. And he poked his tongue. We all know that picture. But he was a genius. Now we know that leaders who leverage the weaknesses of their staff, who try to mend the weaknesses, who try to improve on the weaknesses, will reach an average underperformance of 26%. Managers who leverage the strength will reach an overperformance of 35%. Look at the gap. Christina's standing, she's looking at me very badly, so I know I have to stop and I have to finish my presentation. Let me come to the end. I know that, mein Führer. And that is empowerment, okay? Empowerment is crucial. You have to make sure that the people are able to act on behalf of the company. Because in today's world, you can only be quick in implementing a strategy if every part of the company has the strategy in their genes and in their behavior. So you have to empower people. And the best thing to empower people is get rid of yourself. Take a sabbatical. Go away. Oh no, I can't. I'm just so unique and unsubstitutable. Believe me, that's not true. Everybody's substitutable. Go away and let the people grow while you're away. You recreate your own health, you will come back stronger, and you will have made 2 people grow in the year you were away. And how to deal with that year we can discuss offline with huge pleasure. Now, I'm coming to the end of my story, and I'd like to tell you 2 little stories before Christina kicks me in the butt. And that is, the first one is about a lady called Sabia. She was the head of corporate communication of Allianz in Washington. And she was on home leave in Düsseldorf, flying to somewhere, and she was waiting for her airplane to board, and she heard a person screaming into the phone. Damned Allianz, I'm going to kill that company. They're so bozos, just cancel all the policies. I hate them. What a shitty company. She worked for Allianz. She looked whether she had Allianz written somewhere. She was blushing. She was embarrassed. And she said, oh, my goodness. Then she boarded the plane, and then she thought, but that's not the company I know. So she went to that guy and said, look, my name is Sabia Schwarzer. I work for Allianz in Washington. I heard I couldn't overhear this because you were so loud. What happened? And he gave her his business card. And within 2 days, even though she was not in sales, she was not in industrial assurance, which this thing was about, she addressed the issue with her colleagues in Germany, and they solved it. This guy was really happy, and he brought back all of his business to Allianz. Sabia, mother of 3 kids, grew through her job in maternity leaves, where younger people exploited her maternity leaves to grow, is now my successor at Allianz, and is the typical example of what an empowered employee can do. Last but not least, you say, well, but she was there on top. She knew about the top management and the strategy. The last story I'm going to share with you is about Sadia Zain. Sadia sits in Singapore. Okay, I was just coming back from Minneapolis, holding a town hall, and the CEO of Minneapolis called me up when I landed in Munich. Never come back to Minneapolis again. I said, oh, shit, what did I do? You said every employee is an ambassador. Every employee represents the company. You know what? When I came to the office, the lady at the reception desk said, oh, whatever his name is, let's call him Joe. Joe, I'm here at the reception desk. I'm the business card of the company. I think I should be entitled to a new job title that shows how important I am. You know, Emilio, I have better things to do than dealing with a reception lady. So don't come back to Minneapolis ever again. 6 months later, I get this email by Sadia Zain from Singapore, never met this lady. She said, oh, dear Mr. Galli Zugaro, I heard about the Minneapolis thing. I said, how did she hear? Okay. And I work at the reception desk in Allianz Reinsurance in Singapore, and I talked to my boss and asked him to change my job title. Said, okay, and they agreed, and then she sent me a picture of herself, nice, smiling Asian lady, working at the reception desk, and it said, Sadia Zain, Director of First Impressions. Everybody can do it. Thank you.